I asked. I settled the duffel on my shoulder, and he held the door. My parents are going out, he said, and the words came out of him in a rush. Figured it's about time you saw my humble abode. The house was not a humble abode. It was a great white clapboard house on the edge of Ashford, Virginia, standing like an old sentinel above the hills. Ancient pines crowded around the backyard, and their shadows reached across the porch. Inside, the air held the scent of aged timber varnish, and something else, something like soil long turned over in forgotten graves. His mother was a thin woman with sharp features and eyes that darted. Her smile was polite, but hollow. She flitted from room to room with jumpy energy, asking about drinks, snacks, if we were too warm or too cold. His father said nothing. A hulking man in a brown cardigan, seated in a leather recliner, eyes tracking us from beneath thick brows. I caught a whisper between them as we passed, hushed but tense. At 7, they left. So what's the plan? I asked, dropping my bag on the hardwood floor of his room. Compared to the rest of the house, it felt like a dorm room. Posters, worn carpet, a TV stand, a battered Xbox. It was the only place untouched by the strange gravity of the house. Pizza, video games, the usual, Caleb said, powering on the console. His tone was breezy, but I saw the tension in his jaw. For a while, it was normal. Pizza grease on our fingers, controllers in our hands, laughter in the air. We didn't talk about the house or the strangeness. For a while, it was just two old friends in a bubble of light and sound. Then, around 8:57, he paused the game. "Hey, there's just one thing," he said, avoiding my eyes, working the controller nervously in his fingers. "A rule my parents have." "A rule?" "Yeah. After 9:00 p.m., we have to stay in here. We can't leave the room. Not for the bathroom. Not for anything." I stared. "You're joking. What if I have to pee?" "Pee now," he said, nodding at an empty Gatorade bottle on his desk. "After 9, that's it." I laughed. He didn't. "You're serious?" "They're weird about security," Caleb said, but his voice betrayed him. "Old house, creaky floors. Drafty, you know." A grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime the hour. Caleb flinched. Bong, bong, bong. He was across the room before the 9th chime. He shut the door and slid home a thick iron bolt I hadn't noticed before. The sound of it locking echoed like a sentence being handed down. "There," he muttered. His forehead was beaded with sweat. "We're good." "Caleb, what the hell is going on?" "Nothing. Just, their rules." He didn't look at me. He turned the volume up, filling the room with digital gunfire and explosions. But I didn't hear the game. I heard the silence pressing in from the hall. The kind of silence that listens. That waits. Another hour passed. "You really need to tell your parents this is how horror movies start," I joked weakly. He smiled. But it didn't touch his eyes. Then we heard it, a soft, deliberate sound. A thump in the hallway. Then a dragging. Like something heavy being pulled. What the hell was that? I whispered. "How settling," he said without hesitation, fingers glued to the controller. "That's not settling." The sound stopped. The stillness that followed was worse. Then, a new noise. A dragging, scraping sound across the boards below. I muted the TV. "That's definitely not." "Just ignore it," Caleb interrupted. His voice cracked. "Don't acknowledge it. It'll go away." "What will?" Before he could answer, a voice. "Caleb? Honey." It was a woman's voice. His mother's voice. "Caleb, sweetheart. We came back early. I brought cookies. Open the door." I looked at him. He was pale as chalk. He didn't move. Only shook his head slowly, eyes locked on the door. "Caleb, that's your mom." "Don't be silly, baby," the voice cooed, closer now. "Still warm. Chocolate chip." The dragging sound stopped. Then came a wet knock. "Caleb? Marcus? Are you boys all right?" My name. I hadn't told her my name. Then the doorknob turned, once, twice. The rattling began. Then a bang. "Boys," the voice snapped, now sharp, splintered. "Open the door." A blow struck the door and I scrambled back. And then, a rasp. A croaking voice, like someone drowning in mud.
Iken ODWYORINTHRE.
Something began to leak from beneath the door. Thick. Black. Smelling of rot. Caleb dove under his bed covers. He knew this routine. This wasn't fear of the unknown, it was routine terror. A rhythm. I stayed where I was, trembling. Then, another voice. "Marcus," it said softly. My mom's voice. My mom's voice. "Sweetheart, come out. You're scaring me." A flood of emotions hit me. Love. Horror. Longing. "Let me in, baby," she said gently. "Let me take you home." Behind the door came a chuckle. Dry. Brittle. Like wind through dead leaves. I collapsed against the wall. The thing whispered in my mother's voice. And began scraping the wood. Slowly. Patiently. It whispered all night. And I sat there with a flashlight in my hand, wondering what I'd stepped into. That's when Caleb spoke again. Broken. Hollow. We call it the Nightman. The story came out of him then, I wrote later in my journal. But that doesn't do it justice. Caleb didn't tell me the story, he bled it. His voice was barely a whisper, shredded by years of silence. He rocked slightly on the bed, hugging his knees. My great-great-grandfather built this house, he said, eyes not on me, but fixed somewhere deep in the corner of the room. Right on the edge of the old Ashford burial grounds. He thought it was just superstition. Cheap land, you know. He paused, chewing on the inside of his cheek. But there was something here before. Before the house. Before even the graves. The land was promised. To what? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. No one knows. It doesn't have a name, Caleb said. We just call it the Nightman. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw someone older than 17. Worn. Haunted. It made a deal with him, he continued. Or maybe he made the deal. But ever since then, our families had to follow the rules. We get the house by day. But from 9 at night until sunrise, it belongs to him. I sat very still. And he's lonely, Caleb added. So he plays. He wears pieces of us. Uses things from the house to shape a body. I remembered the apron. The photo. The voice. It's never broken through the door before, I said quietly. Caleb nodded slowly. It's changing. It's hungry. The rules used to be enough. Don't look, don't speak, don't leave. But lately... He swallowed hard. My parents said it's not enough anymore. They said, maybe it needed someone new. Someone who isn't bound by the family's pact. My blood ran cold. You invited me here, I whispered. You brought me here for that thing? His voice broke. I didn't want to, Marcus. I swear. They made me. Said maybe it'd leave us alone for a while if it got what it wanted. There was no point yelling. No point in rage. The truth already lived in my bones, like cold steel. That's when the scraping stopped. The hallway went quiet, utterly quiet. Even the house seemed to be holding its breath. Caleb, I said, voice tight, what does that mean? He didn't answer. Then came the sound of stairs creaking. One. Then another. And another. Heavy footsteps. A drag. Thump. Drag. It was coming upstairs. It wasn't pretending anymore. It knew the game was over. The footsteps stopped just outside our room. A breath. Then. Crack. The door shook like it had been struck by a battering ram. Splinters burst from the frame. Crack. Bang. The bolt shrieked. The wood split like a dry bone. It's never tried to break the door down. Caleb sobbed, backing into a corner. With a final blow, the bolt tore from the wall. The door swung open on broken hinges. And I saw it. Not a man. Not a beast. A monster made of everything it had taken. The bones of the house, banisters, floorboards, copper piping, wires, and cloth. Its chest was a cage of splintered rails. Inside that cage, my own duffel bag, pulsing, glowing faintly, like it had become part of its heart. Its head was the old grandfather clock from the hallway. Its pendulum swung wildly behind cracked glass. From the clock came not one voice, but many, all speaking at once. T-I-M-E-I-S-U-P. The thing stepped into the room. The stench of rot and sawdust filled the air. Its claw was made from forks and butter knives, lashed with wire. It raised the arm high. I grabbed a glass trophy from Caleb's desk and threw it. Crash. The glass face of the clock head shattered. The thing reeled back and howled, a horrible sound, like time itself collapsing. The window. I yelled. We ran. My hands fumbled with the latch. Painted shut. Help me with the bed. I screamed. Together, we flipped it. Oak. Heavy. We made a barricade as the monster surged forward, its claws tearing fabric, wood, anything. The sun. Caleb cried. It has to be back in the dark before sunrise. I looked out the window. Black sky. No stars. We wouldn't make it. It stepped forward, dragging part of the bed with it. The pendulum swung like a judgment over us. And then, I saw something. Behind the TV. A flashlight. Big. Metal. Bright. Idove. Just as it lunged. I clicked the switch. A beam of pure white light hit its face. It screamed. Not in rage, in agony. The light didn't burn it. It unmade it. Parts fell, the forks, the planks, the wire, a stair rail. It stumbled backward. It hid in the shadows near the door. And that began the longest night of my life. I held the flashlight like a sword. Its beam, searing white and trembling slightly, was the only thing between us and the nightmare in the doorway. Caleb crouched behind me, hands over his ears, whispering prayers I couldn't understand. The thing, the nightman, lingered in the threshold like it still hadn't decided whether to retreat or strike again. Pieces of it had fallen, silverware fingers, bent wood, frayed fabric, now scattered across the floor. But the core of it remained. Watching. Waiting. Every time it edged forward, I thrust the beam at it. And every time it hissed, a sound like bones snapping underwater, and retreated. But I knew what it was waiting for. It was waiting for the flashlight to die. The beam was already dimmer than before. My wrist was cramping. My palm slick with sweat. And we still had hours until dawn. It's going to run out, I said hoarsely. I know, Caleb murmured behind me. It always does. That's why we never make it through alone. What does that mean? He didn't answer. The nightman paced along the far wall now, never quite stepping into the beam, but circling. Hunting. The clicking of its limbs was like nails tapping across hardwood, but random. Erratic. It stopped pretending to be human. Every few minutes, it lunged, sudden and wild, and I would slash the light across its face. The exposed wood in its clock head had begun to blister, blackened from the inside. But still it didn't retreat. It wanted to break us. And it nearly did. Around 4 a.m., the flashlight began to flicker. Weak pulses. Then darkness. Then back again. No. Iwisparat. No. Just a little longer, Caleb pleaded. His face was hollow. His eyes locked on the window. But there was no glow. The night outside was still a suffocating black. The nightman knew. It began assembling itself again, pulling from the wreckage it had left behind. The trophy I'd thrown. The slats of the shattered bed. My backpack. The broken door. It was rebuilding. And with each new piece, it grew bigger. Stronger. Bolder. The flashlight gave another weak stutter. And then for one full second, it died. The darkness collapsed around us like a scream. Then it lunged. Its limbs struck the floorboards like war drums. A claw of bent coat hangers reached for my throat. I screamed. Threw my arms up. And that's when it happened. A single line of silver light etched itself across the window. Barely there, but steady. Dawn. The creature froze. Mid-motion. Its body twisted in pain, or resistance. The grandfather clock pendulum flailed wildly in its broken face. Inside the ribcage of stairs, my duffel bag began to convulse, like a trapped heart. Then a beam of sun pierced the room and struck it full across the chest. And the nightman unraveled. It didn't scream. It didn't run. It just came apart. The arms collapsed into copper piping. The chest unraveled into banister rails. The face of the clock shattered into dust. The duffel bag rolled gently to a stop beside me, unharmed. A moment later, the pile of parts was nothing but a mound of broken things and a thin coat of gray ash. It was over. Caleb dropped to his knees and sobbed. I just sat there, hollow. We had survived. But something in me told me I wasn't meant to. A few minutes later, the door to Caleb's parents' room creaked open. They walked into the wreckage, their faces pale, unreadable. They didn't ask if we were hurt. They didn't offer thanks. They just looked at the pile of debris. And then they looked at me. Not with relief. Not with regret. With disappointment. It was then I understood. The plan had failed. The Nightman had not accepted the offering. I was the one who got away. And for that, Caleb's family would never forgive me.